Middle school and high school feels like it took place in another life altogether. We can barely recall details from those days, but we know that it was some of the best years of our lives. Tension-free from responsibilities, playing fun games and spending time with your family. When we look back, we feel like those times have collapsed in front of our eyes. Most of you might be waiting eagerly for your school reunion invite. And when that day comes, you may never know what to expect. Emotions are at overdrive, but thankfully, you would be prepared for it. Unconventional reunions do not allow you even a second to think or feel. This heartwarming story about a middle school reunion that took place in the most unlikely location and pulled us down to tears. The Miami-Dade Bond Court was in session, and it was just like any other day. Many convicts bought into the courtroom and seated according to order. Many people were mostly first-time offenders, but the others had their encounters with the law several times before. But whether you are a first-time offender or not, the law does not spare you from the punishment. The judge was already tired of seeing disrespectful people around her. Many of them would try and obey the orders, but several people had dozed off without a care in this situation. Many people who end up in court for petty crimes do not generally have a lawyer. They are all represented by the public defendants. The court allows them all the freedom to hire a lawyer by themselves if they have the money for it. Hiring a lawyer is not cheap in this country unless you know you are wrongfully framed. In this case, you will get compensated by the opposite party for it at the end of the trial. It is also important for the judge to know if the accused has served in the US military or any of the reserves. The hearing for this category is usually not done in civilian court. The courtroom is the last place for a reunion to take place. And if you are in the courtroom, the chances are that you are here to face charges or support a person facing charges. It is embarrassing for anyone you know apart from your family to see you standing in orange jumpsuits. But God always plays his tiny games. When he makes his presence known, it is usually to show someone the value of life. Read on to witness one of the most emotional stories you have come across in a while. The judge started her work as usual and began calling people one by one to the witness stand. It's not a fun thing for the judge to see criminals after criminals every day. It makes her want to run away to a place far away from humans. We get to see only the tip of the iceberg when crimes are reported in the news. But the judges go through every case, petty or large. But it looked like this judge did not seem to be unaffected by the people presenting themselves. Nevertheless, it did not stop this woman from putting on a huge smile on her face and greeting each one as they stand in the witness box. She met with several accused on that day. One by one, they came around and presented their case in front of the judge. Then came along a man, Mr. Booth, who was waiting for the judge to speak up. But she was busy clearing the forms of the previous person in the stand. Before the judge read out the crimes he was accused of, she looked at him and wished him a good morning. She also went about asking how his day was. Mr. Booth was a polite man, so he answered back with respect. He never spoke without referring to her as ma'am. Once she looked at his arrest records, she had a surprised look on her face. The man had 3 arrest records on him: reckless driving, property damage, and leaving the scene of a crash with a serious injury. The moment he heard the judge announce these, he bent down his face in shame. But he was quick to look back at her and corrected her. "Ma'am, I believe it was leaving the scene of a crash with no serious injury." She was quick to correct herself and apologized for it. But she could not help but stare at the man again and again. She was not able to concentrate on her work for some reason. At the witness stand, this man was laughing his heart out with an infectious smile on his face. Judge Glazer went on to explain the terms of his bond. After all, he was liable to pay the damages he caused. The amount on the first bond was $7,500. Mr. Booth put his head back down again. But he never showed even a small sign of disrespect. Mr. Booth politely accepted all other charges for the second and third crimes committed. He knew what he was guilty of and looked like he wanted to make some major amends in his life. All this while, the judges kept looking at his face. There was something odd, and she was not able to piece the facts together. It was time for the man to leave the witness stand, but she was not ready to let the man leave as of yet. Judge Glazer finally remembered where her thoughts were wandering. A small smile came across her face, and she asked Mr. Booth if she can ask him a question. Mr. Booth's expressions changed, and he was worried about what question was about to come his way. She saw his nervousness but went ahead with her question anyway. With a shiver in her voice, she asked, "Did you go to Miami Beach Nautilus Middle School?" Mr. Booth did not answer this question with words. The moment he heard her say this, his memory rushed back to his middle school days, and his eyes were filled with tears. Mr. Booth bent down his head and wept his eyes out. At first, it looked like he was ashamed of something, but the truth was revealed later on. Booth was not able to believe who was sitting in front of him. Once he did, he cried more. Mindy Glazer was his friend when he was in middle school. Mindy never imagined she would come across a friend in the courtroom standing in the witness box. But the feeling here was different, and she was not feeling ashamed to call him a friend. The only words that were coming out of his mouth were, "Oh my goodness," over and over again. Mindy was almost in tears, but she was fighting it back as much as possible. Both of them looked like they were well into their 40s, so seeing someone who went to middle school with them can be a rush of emotions. Secondly, seeing them in a courtroom can add to the waterworks. Mindy never wanted to see this man she knew to stand in front of him in an orange jumpsuit. She lowered her face to wipe her tears off. They looked at each other and exchanged smiles. Booth was crying and laughing at the same time. Mindy looked at Booth and told him, "I am so sorry to see you here, sir." After she graduated from middle school, Mindy always wondered what happened to Booth. After all, they were good friends, and Mindley left the school with good memories of the man. It was quite some time now, and Booth was still not able to stop crying. Mindy patiently waited for him to calm down. After he started wiping his tears off, Mindy looked at the jury and told them this is the nicest kid in the entire school. Hearing these words, Booth began crying even more. She repeated her sentence several times, reassuring the jury that she had never seen a kid who was more good to her. All their memories rushed back in front of their eyes, and they could not believe the situation they were in. The audience was in awe, and one or two of them had already started crying after looking at them. This surprise reunion was nothing short of meeting a loved one after ages. Mindy never wished she saw Booth in this condition. It broke her heart to see the person who was one of the kindest kids in the school being accused of something. She wondered how life is so funny. Two people who graduated from the same school ended up in different places in life. There are some things that you can control in your life, the other times things go out of control. How did Mr. Booth become a career criminal in the first place? He was a young and promising kid, with high hopes and dreams in his eyes. He faced tons of issues domestically, which led him to fall into a life of drugs and other addictions. Booth would occasionally be forced to provide for his family at an early stage. The wrong company taught him things that he would not otherwise get into. He never wanted such a life for himself. Leading up to drug addictions and other downfall led him in a different direction. His friend encouraged him to engage in petty theft. After several brushes with the law, Booth even went to prison several times for petty crimes. He felt like he was hopeless and worthless to lead a clean life. Booth almost gave up in life before this encounter with his middle school friend. He wondered if he could have achieved something meaningful in life if he had not gotten himself into trouble. Before Judge Glazer was ready to tell the audience about his behavior, she begged him to try and lead a clean life. Mindy said she wished she never met him here in this condition. "All the best, sir, try and lead a lawful life," she said with her voice trembling away. Booth had no words for her. He looked at Mindy and smiled while he tried to wipe away his tears. He did not care for the fact that he was about to pay a hefty amount for bail. She smiled at Booth as he left the witness stand. Mindy smiled back at him and hoped to see him again. Before she headed to her next defendant, she paused to let the jury know how nice of a kid he was. She shared with them the fact that he never got in trouble for anything. Booth was a polite kid and would often help people around him. It did not matter if Booth himself was sad, he would help cheer up a classmate when needed. Booth came back one last time and looked deep into her eyes and asked her, "Is it really you? I'm unable to believe what just happened to me," he exclaimed. Mindy was happy that the memories she shared with this kid were all fun and happy ones. The entire court was in silence while Mindy and Booth wept for some more time. Even though he had to pay close to $55,000 for his bail, he could not help but think about the present situation. How did they know each other? Booth loved to play football, and it was one of his favorite pastime. Mindy loved football as well. She would love to run into the school ground to practice football with her friends and Booth. Her memories with him were mostly associated with playing fun games with him. Sometimes when kids play together, they tend to be mean. But even in situations like that, Booth showed what a gem he was to the world. This character left a lasting impression on Judge Mindy. As for Booth, he was put into prison for 10 months. His sentence was probably shortened because of his behavior in the past. Post his visit to the prison, Booth had to get assigned to a drug treatment program. If this encounter did not change the way he looks at life, we don't know what will. After more than 30 years after middle school, life brought him to the most unlikely situation to help change his life. Will they ever see each other again? The court shared the court bond video. The reunion between the judge and the inmate went viral soon. After his 10-month tenure in jail, his family members were eagerly waiting for him to come out. He was overjoyed and hugged his family members. But he had no idea that there was a surprise waiting for him around the corner. Judge Mindy was there to meet him on his release day. Booth was unable to hold his tears back. He could not believe after all these months, she remembered and came back to see him. Booth was given a second chance at life from the court. Mindy spoke to him and told him what he could do to turn his life around. Booth was patient and listened to every word the judge had to tell him. More than anything, he was grateful that he was recognized by her after all these years and had nothing but kind words for him. Booth promised to live a clean life and help the community. He also vowed to help another person when they are most in need of it. Booth openly stated that Mindy is his inspiration and motivation to turn a new page in life. We need to be grateful for the opportunities that life presents us with. Whether we are down in the dumps and feeling sorry for ourselves or otherwise, you have to treat life like it is a precious gift from God.